full house tonight.
We're going off my phone.
Okay, you can try to mess around.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, mine's just like scars.
We're good. So usually splitting it.
So, he's 13 pounds to 51 pounds. Yeah, I did 3 weeks. He's gonna be 125 pounds.
Close that. That's a good split. Good evening. We would like to call the February 23rd, 2023 regular city council meeting to order at 6 p.m. Roll call. We've got everybody in attendance tonight. We will start with having a pledge of allegiance led by Councilman Dixon, followed by an invocation by Pastor Clay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, let me say thank you to the council persons and to our honorable mayor for giving us the privilege to be in here. Thank you. If you'll bow your heads with me, and we'll pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, for your wisdom, and support as the city council begins this meeting. Help them to engage in good, meaningful discussion. We ask that you allow these council members to grow closer as a group and nurture the bonds of community. I pray that this group of leaders will be able to discuss and tackle and be efficient in handling all the things that may be presented to them. I pray also that you give them grace to come up with the best possible and morally right solutions that would best benefit the people we serve. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, consent agenda for the February 9th, 2023. You should all have a copy of that with you. We hope you've had a chance to look it over.
Make a motion to pass the consent agenda as is.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, motion carries. All right, number 5, call to the public for non-agenda items.
There are none.
There are none. Number 6, call to the public for agenda items.
There are none.
There are none. Move right along. Thank you. All right, item number 7, new business. All right, so what this is, we've got 2 ordinances to go through tonight. This is the first reading for each of them. So I will go ahead and read through the full ordinance tonight. I'll try not to speak too fast, but keep it going. How's that? So, ordinance 23-01, an ordinance of the city of Holbrook, Arizona, regarding allowing residential units in commercial zones. Whereas people are moving to Holbrook, creating a scarcity of housing, and whereas housing costs continue to rise, and whereas although residential units are allowed in the RRC-1 Railroad District commercial zone, they are not allowed in the C1 neighborhood commercial or C2 general commercial zones. And whereas allowing residential units in all commercial zones will offer an option for those who are unable to find housing or may not be able to afford a single family home. And whereas it is the desire of the city council to increase the availability of housing by allowing residential units in all commercial zones. Now therefore be it ordained by the mayor and council of the city of Holbrook. Section 1. Holbrook City Code Section 6-1-14 C-1 Neighborhood Commercial Zone C Conditional Uses is modified by adding residential units above commercial buildings. Section 2, Holbrook City Code Section 6-1-15 C2 General Commercial Zone C Conditional Uses is modified by adding residential units above commercial buildings. Section 3, the city manager is authorized to carry out the terms of this ordinance. So tonight is just a first reading. We can discuss what this means, and then at the next city council meeting, it'll go to the vote. So,
Robert has some.
Robert, do you have
No, thank you.
thank you.
We've already had this going on, so I'm not understanding. Let me see here. C1 neighborhood commercial. I know the railroad district had it, but we've already had it going on in the city of Holbrook. Up on the hill, if you remember right, Advanced Plumbing, they had a residential unit above the plumbing shop there and the old steakhouse run by Nahart. Which now they have a chiropractor's office down below and they're living on the top.
And it,
So it's going on now.
This makes it legal.
exactly.
And I'm not liking that.
Well, the point so of this is, you know, we do have a zoning issues going on with our commercial and our residential right now. So this is the time, and we appreciate Manager Soltis bringing this up. It's like we do need to address this. And so that we don't keep having illegal activities saying, well, so-and-so did it. When we make it an ordinance, then we have the authority to actually make sure it's enforced correctly. Did you have a comment?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Does this means though that conditional uses are still required?
Yes, right, yes.
Okay.
It's not a permitted use, it's a conditional use. So what'll happen is if someone wants to apply for this, they have to go before planning and zoning.
And they do put conditions on it.
And they
so
do
that
put conditions, that's right.
It's not.
So they'll ask the appropriate questions, parking and things like that.
Right, okay.
Because all buildings won't be conducive to it.
That's right,
And so,
that's right.
but
In a
for
permitted
those
use
that-
situation, in a permitted use situation, you just say whoever wanted to do it can do it. In this case, planning and zoning will look and see whether it's appropriate use or not.
Thank you.
So if we turn this down and say no, then what happens to the buildings that are already doing it?
You're grandfathered in, most likely, so.
See, that's,
But that doesn't mean going forward, and we're not gonna worry about the past, we're
Right.
moving forward with vision. We wanna make sure everything we're doing now is like, all right, we can't just, as a council, say, well, just because people are doing it, it's allowed. It's like, if we wanna actually make real change, then we've got to be able to enforce it, and we can't enforce it unless it's an ordinance. So,
And if I could just add, the zoning code, somewhere around 1987, so it looks like what happened, of course I wasn't here, they just tried to put a code together that sort of fit where the city was at the time. So that meant also that you had non-conforming uses, so they were already in place, they're allowed to continue in place, so that's part of what is going on here. We're just saying in this case, we think this is a good use for residential housing above commercial. We won't be taking away any commercial because the bottom floors will still be commercial. This is, for example, what's happening in Flagstaff. Many communities do this. Many countries around the world do this. The bottom floor is commercial, top floors are residential. And it makes it a little bit more affordable. So if someone builds a structure, instead of having a separate home, they could actually live on the top floor and then they could have their commercial on the bottom floor. It's really a good option for small communities.
we have a lot of options, we've got a lot of buildings, and I know, I'm thankful for the brownfields, men that are here tonight, and we'll talk about that too, you know, some potential uses, and so I'm excited with what it can do, but without taking away our commercial, because we have limited commercial space, especially down Navajo and Hopi Boulevard. So we wanna make sure we protect our commercial spaces, so this also protects that as well, saying, no, keep it commercial on that bottom level, and then we'll chat, you know, when it comes down to that residential unit on top.
okay, one more question here, just take the property next to you, next to your shop down there. They're trying to get that prepared, right, for, so what happens if we okay this? I know everything has to go before planning and zoning, but what happens if they build something on top of there and they live in that and then they rent all the bottoms out?
Well, that's where it's gotta be enforced correctly, and it'd have to come to planning and zoning first. And so each of those, it'll be a case-by-case
Well,
situation,
that's-
so. And like you said, we have to take it to planning and zoning each time, which then planning and zoning brings it to us.
And Mayor, if I can add, before your time and some of the new council members, we did code cleanup for residential. So all of the residential sections now are cleaned up. We had contradiction as far as terms and so forth. We have done nothing for commercial, and so this is really the next step.
And I appreciate your concerns, Councilman Black, because we do need to ask these questions, and we don't take these ordinances lightly. And so, with that, is there any questions or comments on?
I personally think it's a good idea, because you're keeping commercial in the commercial zone, but you're allowing above to be residential, so that, I mean, somebody wants to live above in the commercial property, you're gonna have to deal with the issues that come with it, but you're not taking away from residential.
Yeah, so,
I think it's a good idea,
great, so,
with conditions, not.
right. All right, we appreciate your comments. Any other comments for now? like I said, we will, go to a vote next week. If you have any follow-up questions, we're welcome to come, meet with Manager Soltis for any clarifying comments.
And Mayor, and if I could add, that's the whole idea of the first and the second reading. We introduce the topic, we talk about it, gives public opportunity to understand what's going on. At the next meeting, they can show up and maybe express concerns. And ideally ask questions before the meeting so we can have those answered.
Thank you for that. Okay, with that, we will go on to item number B, ordinance 23.02. And I will read this in its entirety as well. It says, an ordinance of the city of Holbrook, Arizona regarding residential care services in the commercial zones. Whereas Holbrook City Code Section 6-1-14, C1 neighborhood commercial zones lists residential care services as a principal permitted use. And whereas Holbrook City Code Section 6-1-15, C2 general commercial zone B 28 allows for any principal use permitted in C1 commercial zone. And whereas Holbrook City Code Section 6-2-1 general regulations Y residential care service criteria number 3 is arguably inconsistent with principal permitted use by requiring a conditional use permit. And whereas it is the desire of the City Council to remove this contradiction and replace it with clear and concise language. Now therefore be it ordained by the Mayor and the Council of the City of Holbrook, Section 1, Holbrook City Code is modified as follows. By removing residential care services from 6-1-14 C1 neighborhood commercial zone B, principal permitted uses, by adding residential care services meeting the criteria in Article 6-2-1 subsection Y to 6-1-14 C1 neighborhood commercial zone C conditional uses. By adding residential care services meeting the criteria in Article 6-2-1 subsection Y to 6-1-15 C2 general commercial zone C conditional uses. Section 2, the city manager is authorized to carry out the terms of this ordinance. And again, this is a first reading and it will go to the vote on March 9th. So this one's a little more tricky. This is just clearing up a contradiction in the codes. I printed out just those pages that this did because I think the code is 200 plus pages. So if any of you guys want to take a look at it in your code book, it is online. But basically I'll try to say it and then we'll let Manager Soltis clarify anything. But basically there's a contradiction, you know, of if it's a residential facility use, it was in two different areas. One required an additional permit use and the other one was a principal use permitted, meaning they only needed to get, you know, permission, well not even really permission. Do you want me to just turn it over to you?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So, yeah, no, that's okay, yeah. So what that means is a principal permitted use, you don't need any permission. You call up and say, for example, I want to do a residential care services in this zone. We look it up in the code, it's a principal use, you're done. The problem is, it's also in definition says it must be a conditional use, so it's kind of confusing. So initially, you could go online, you could look at it and say, oh, I can do residential care services, a principal use, done, don't have to talk to anybody about anything. But then if you flip to the definition says it's a conditional use. So what we're doing is taking it out of the principal use and putting it where it is properly located, which should be under a conditional use per definition. So just cleaning up the code, minimizing that confusion.
Which I always prefer if you can have to come to a planning and zoning to make sure everything is on the up and up, all the questions are asked, make sure it's the right kind of facilities. And so this requires anybody wanting to do that to come to planning and zoning, and thus they'll bring it to us for that conditional use permit.
Mayor Smith, how would this affect Change Point's desire to turn a hotel into a?
So, yes, so that's exactly what this is in regards to. There was conflicts, you know, and so one, like Manager Soltis said, one section said yes, you can do it, the other one said no. So what'll happen now is Change Point will need to come meet with planning and zoning and ask for that conditional use permit.
Okay.
And so.
So it's really a cleanup as far as easy read. You do an in-depth look, you find the definition, and you say, oh, it's a conditional use. But again, normally how the process would work, someone calls up and says, for example, I want to do residential care or art gallery or whatever it is. We tell them where the code book is. They're welcome to take a look. They look under principal permitted use and think they're done. And that's how it's supposed to work. But in our case, again, it's in 2 locations.
So this one keeps our commercial property again, where we have a little more control of who's coming in and make sure the conditional use permits are correct, you know, and everything is by the book and it's the right use for that building.
So this gives Change Point a way forward.
Okay, so they'll have the option, oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Yeah,
So yes, that'll give them the opportunity then to come to the Planning and Zoning Commission board and they'll share their case. And that is a time during that Planning and Zoning Commission where, they'll contact all the neighbors, neighboring properties in that area. They'll get a chance to come and say if they're for or against them coming into it. Citizens are welcome to come as well. And then what'll happen is, I believe, Manager Soltis, correct me if I'm wrong, then the Planning and Zoning Commission will come to our meeting, the next meeting, after their planning and zoning, and give their recommendations based off their, not necessarily a public hearing, but at least their take from what they were told by Change Point and also what the neighbors said.
So
It would be a
actually,
public hearing.
yeah, so actually in this case, how it works is, for the conditional use, notice has been put in the newspaper that there's a public hearing before planning and zoning. Notice was provided to people within 300-foot radius of that location that will be a public hearing before planning and zoning. As far as a conditional use is concerned, they do not have to come back to council. They would only come back to council if planning and zoning turned it down and then they want to repeal it. For the zoning case, they have to come back before council. And the reason for that is, it's an accepted use, they just need to meet the appropriate conditions. So the decision has already been made, if you will, on council's part. You said, this is what we're gonna allow for permitted uses, this is what we're gonna allow for conditional uses. Planning and zoning, please make sure that they meet those conditional uses. So if planning and zoning approves this, they're done, as far as conditional use is concerned. Again, zoning, it's a different scenario. So we have a zoning case coming up, it'll go before planning and zoning, they'll have their public hearing, then we'll have another public hearing before the council. They'll come in, they'll say, we had a public hearing, we listened to the public, we made let's say in this case, a positive decision as far as zoning concerned, then council has opportunity to discuss that zoning case again, not the case with conditional use.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
And Ted, I just want to thank you for your diligence, your attention to detail, and your knowledge about all this, and the changes that you've set before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So what we try to do as these issues come up and they brought to my attention is clean the code up. And this is not it. There's other things that are in there that need to be fixed. Matter of fact, as I had mentioned, I'm working, for example, on the financial situation as far as the auditors have brought up. Remember, they had concerns about the purchasing policy, so I'm getting that draft ready. Hopefully, next council meeting, I'll have the first reading. Same sort of idea. We have problems, we have contradictions, or it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So we put an ordinance together and then bring it before you for the decision.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we will close that topic then. Moving on to item number C, Planning and Zoning Commission member appointment. I am going to turn the time over now to Vice Mayor Payne, and I will recuse myself for this item.
Well, I would like to thank Kathleen's husband, David Smith, for agreeing to come back and serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. He, as a contractor, he brings a special set of knowledge that is very valuable to the commission. And with the council's approval, concurrence, I would like to make the appointment of David Smith to the Holbrook Planning and Zoning Commission.
So you're making a motion?
So I assume you appoint, that's because you're acting mayor then, so you appoint, then by with
But
the
I have to have
consent.
the, yeah, I have to have the
Consent.
consent of the council, so Tim, if you would make the,
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve David Smith for the Planning and Zoning Commission member appointment, and I give my consent to do that.
I'll second.
do we need to vote or just go down the, Ted, which would you?
So, yeah, it's a little bit odd. At this point, you make the appointment, they consent to it. If everyone consents, I think you're done. It doesn't call out making a motion in the
Okay.
code.
Pardon me, Tim. Everybody okay with that?
I consent to you appointing him.
There you go, okay. Sorry.
I feel so proud.
It is what it is.
All right, thank you very much. So, thank you, Mr. Smith, for agreeing to come back. So. All right, item number D, council best practices at open meeting law, Belshi.
So Mayor and Council, Mr. Belchi was not able to make the meeting. I'm doing my best to have him rescheduled. Obviously, we have issues out there as far as our roads are concerned. I'm not at all surprised. And so fortunately, our work session folks are here. I was able to get a hold of them and they were able to come in a little bit early. But Tom sends his apologies. And again, I'm hoping that with the next 2 meetings, I'll be able to get him in here. I know you're looking forward to hearing from him. I've worked with Tom for many years, and he's a good man, and I think he's going to bring us some good advice.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, summary of current events. I'll begin. I just want to do a big shout out and thank you to our Holbrook Police Department. They've had a rough couple weeks. So last week with the first closure down on the freeway because of the accident, you know, I don't know how many people are driving down Navajo and Hopi. It was crazy just seeing all the truckers just at a standstill in town. With the storm coming up, they knew it was coming and they knew those road closures are coming, and you didn't even guess there was a freeway closure. I didn't see any trucks hardly at all yesterday. The police department had people stationed on both ends of town, and they were directing the trucks to vacant lots and parking lots and helping them in there. So I know they had officers there all day and all through the night, and so big thank you to our Holbrook PD for keeping our access open. Like the week before, it was
kind of tough.
It was a little tough. So a little intimidating too with all those truckers. So anyway, so thank you to them. And as we're doing thank yous, the Holbrook Chamber of Commerce just did their annual community awards. We had Councilman Nilsson and Manager Soltis were nominated as one of the nominees for Man of the Year. But the winners of the night, and I just want to give my thanks to these, because these are people that go above and beyond what they're asked to do, and this is why they were nominated and awarded this award through the Chamber of Commerce. The Youth of the Year was Kelly Hill. The Organization of the Year was the Navajo County Fair Board and their director. The Woman of the Year was Nicole Young. Man of the Year was Brian Reed. The Director's Choice Award was the Holbrook Police Department. And the President's Award, which is Janet Dean, she's the Holbrook Chamber, she did something a little different. She honored the families of the board members, and I love that.
I did too.
I grew up with my dad. We didn't do anything. My dad didn't get involved in any project without getting the family involved. And anybody that's got kids, I know Councilwoman Pacheco, whatever her kids are involved in, she's involved in, right? Same with Councilwoman Pack. So I was thankful to see that award given out to the families. It was great. With that, we want to give a shout out to our Holbrook High School boys basketball for another great season. They're at the end, you know, they lost it there, but it was great to watch them and super fun. I'm going to let Councilwoman Pat talk about the HHS wrestling. So
yeah, our boys took third in state.
Oh,
There's
wow.
probably like 40 teams.
Wow.
They don't get as much attention as basketball.
Yeah.
They did make it to state, and we had some kids that took places in there. We had a kid that took first in state, a kid that took third.
your kid.
Yeah, and one that was fourth or fifth. I mean, we did excellent.
Very good.
We have
Jason
excellent
Ramirez took
coaches.
state, so.
Shades of back Kenny
Yeah, exactly. So
and Lance Maturs.
yeah, so we're thankful for that. That's all I have. Vice Mayor Payne.
Just a couple of things. My apologies, Robert. I do want to thank everyone for helping my Chiefs win. And I do have my Chiefs tree is no longer decorated, so it's safe to come to my house.
There's always next year.
Yes, I know. I got my little ornaments all ready for next year. And the other thing is, in March, which is next week, Petrified Forest National Park will be celebrating Arizona Archaeology Month, and there will be free guided hikes every Friday and Saturday out at the park. You do need to make a reservation, and they limit the hikes to 10 people, but they've got some really nice ones planned, and it'd be worth a phone call and trip out there. Every time I go, and I think I went during the pandemic more than I've ever gone in my life. It was just a nice place to get away and feel like you had some space. But people don't wait for the guided hikes. They're all over the place. And so if this doesn't fit your schedule, please still go and enjoy one of the wonders of the world that we have right here at our back door.
Thank you.
That's what I have.
Yeah,
Councilman Dixon.
You have to wear shoes though, right?
That was for you, Councilman.
Karina probably doesn't.
All right, Councilman Dixon.
How long are the hikes?
They vary. There's some short ones, but a lot of them are 5 mile ones.
We will hit up the marshes after our work session, how's that? So, all
Yeah, there you go. I don't have anything else.
right, thank you. Councilman Nelson?
The hikes, I took my grandkids on one, I think it was 1.6 miles or so. It was pretty short. But I attended the NACOG meeting today on behalf of the city, and it was all done by Zoom. Nobody could get there, and it was kind of an abbreviated meeting. But that's all.
Thank you. Councilwoman Pacheco?
I have nothing. It's been too busy to even think of.
I understand.
We're glad you're here, that you made it.
It was getting a little empty on that side between you and Councilman Nelson, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Leaning to the right.
Exactly. All right, Councilman Black?
Just a little bit, if I can do it. Apparently last week I turned in some, what I figured were agenda items, and apparently I was a day late on them. I asked for the policy on that, on when we have to do it, and I never got one, but what I want to do, and the reason I'm doing this is, even after we leave the meeting tonight, I'll have people call me and say, what are you guys doing? And I like to have the answers for them, and I don't. So the agenda items that I put on there was cemetery update. Has a fence been painted? Have we looked at installing new gates for better access to burial plots? And Ted emailed me back. As noted in the budget and in my periodic updates, we plan to paint the cemetery fence.
Just follow the summary of current events.
Yeah, this is in current events. Thank you. Point of order.
Were these updates you were going to be talking about?
These are updates I'm going to be talking about, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure how that goes, so,
Yeah,
and we'll
they
get
don't-
some clarification.
They don't fall
So,
under
on
current
updates.
event
They don't.
summaries.
well, and we'll get some clarification of what current events regard versus updates, councilman updates versus current events. And
So
that'll
I
be when we'll,
updated the agenda. The next agendas will have clarification.
okay.
Well, I have a question on that.
Well,
Even though
not for
you
The problem is, we're not
updated-
supposed to ask questions during the discussion part, and that's the unfortunate part, so, and that's how these are planned, so,
That's- as long as people are seeing this happening, I like it.
okay. All right. Sorry, Councilman Black, do you have any current events?
No.
All right. Councilwoman Pack?
No.
Okay.
You shot your wad?
What was that?
You shot your wad with the wrestling?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, city manager.
Sure. Okay, Councilmember Black asked me to provide an update on the cemetery. As noted in the budget and my periodic updates, we plan to paint the cemetery fence. We are waiting for more favorable weather. We will not be adding any gates to the new section of the cemetery. All the spaces in the new section, like the old sections, have been dedicated to burial plots. Problem is that the number of burials have increased dramatically, which means more impact. If the trend continues, we'll be out of plots within the next 3 to 4 years. Black also asked me to give an update on the code compliance officer. As I had mentioned, I was in the process of hiring a code compliance officer, and I have. Her name is Barbara Blythe. An office has been set up for her use. Her start date will be Monday. Councilmember Black also asked me to provide an update on the police department recruitment. The chief has complete support for his department. Officers' positions are budgeted. He is doing his best to recruit new officers. He has plans to update the police department webpage to add hiring information. We have a web provider who we pay to update our websites, and anytime we need to make any kind of changes to that, we just pass the information on to him, and he does the updates for us. Councilmember Black also asked me to provide an update on the streets. We have a 5-year street plan. The plan was made in 2018 before my arrival. Unfortunately, we didn't have the money or equipment necessary to even start this plan when I arrived. Once I started my job here, I prioritized streets. Unfortunately, the asphalt streets have been completely neglected for many years. The equipment was very old and often broken down. We immediately started a pavement preservation program with annual crack sealing. As discussed in my reports, we will be budgeting for fog slurry, and chip sealing depending on road conditions. One of the items that prevented this from happening in the past is that we did not have a street sweeper, but now we do. Following slurry or chip sealing, we will be responsible for sweeping the streets. The other problem was the lack of funding. We have been saving money since I've been here so that we can do larger projects that is difficult to get contractors for small projects. The larger the project, the less waste on mobilization costs. And Mayor and Council, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item number 9, submission of written petition for items not on the agenda.
There are none.
There are none, thank you. So,
Madam Mayor,
is this a submission of written petition?
I beg your pardon?
We're at number 9, the submission of written petition for items.
I do not have a written petition. Madam Mayor, I arrived a little bit late. I would like to address a non-agenda item out of order as an exception to policy, if you would approve.
I have not
So,
received anything.
yeah, I've seen the Navajo County Board of Supervisors do that, now that we're saying we're the same as the county. But you know what, we used to have it at the end of the meeting, so we will allow it this time. You've got 3 minutes.
Well,
Can he write it so I have his
Yeah.
information?
Yeah, so,
yeah, he needs to fill out a form.
did you fill out a form?
I would be glad to if I could just, glad to take care of the form
And
without
nothing,
taking any more of the council's time.
nothing you might consider if
I
we set a
apologize,
precedent.
Madam
now.
Mayor.
What's that?
Thank you very much. Although I've got my.
I understand. We will,
Without wasting
take
the
that.
time of the council, Madam Mayor, I will complete the form and ensure
You
that
want-
it's properly taken care of for the clerk before I leave.
thank you, and, our clerk will
sorry?
give you her 3 minutes, she'll let you know when your 3-minute
Certainly.
warning is up.
I have been a member of the Hopi Tribe Economic Development Corporation Board for about 8 years, and you're aware that we owned the Hopi Travel Plaza and sold it. It is now prospering under new ownership and different things. We own the hat factory, the old building in Winslow, and we've worked very diligently to renovate that, spent a significant amount of money on that one. I mention that because I have a great desire to see a significant amount of economic development within the community. And I believe specifically with the recall last fall, Madam Mayor, and the election of a number of different members on the council, that there needs to be a significantly greater and more aggressive posture of the council towards that, towards economic development. That means jobs, that means communities, code enforcement and all the things that go with it, but primarily it means involvement in economic development. That's a broad topic. What I would recommend to the council is that the economic development should be a permanent issue, a permanent agenda item on each council meeting, that it can be addressed and discussed so that the community is aware that the changes that the community, the elected voters, the voters wanted is being addressed and pursued. There are a number of things that are happening, but the idea that we don't see the reports and the different things that are going on that are of interest to the community, and that the city of Winslow dominates the newspaper, is a bit distressing. I point out 2 items of concern, one of which is the article in the paper week before last regarding a city employee working on another private property, private company, that I haven't seen any resolution on, and that needs to be written in the paper. It needs to have some kind of resolution. We shouldn't have to see questions like that arise without commentary that explains the situation, because it was very confusing and put the city in a bad light. None of us want that. The second item I would mention is the difficulty and controversy with the Hash Knife Pony Express statue. I would say at this point, since that event is completed, that the first thing I did when I drove by that statue at night is see that it was not illuminated. That needs to be taken care of, however that's done. At the same time, a maintenance agreement needs to be done. The idea that the previous marquee wasn't maintained is unacceptable. No matter who contributed money towards it, it was on city property, and it should have had some type of contract for maintenance. That's true of virtually everything that's constructed or built, and I would hope that as things progress, the council will address these things and make sure that that's a permanent agenda item it needs to be a more aggressive posture. And the things that are being discussed here are
Aye.
vital to all of us that have been here.
All right,
Thank you for your time, Madam Mayor.
May I,
Thank you.
I think that we are allowed to comment when there has been.
We can't comment to them, but we can direct,
We
I
can do
can-
clarification
No.
also.
clarify.
No, I'm thinking that we can,
Right.
there are some very stringent things where you can speak. Individual members of the public body may respond to comments made by others who have addressed the body. Number one, I appreciate your input, David, but I think you took advantage of Kathleen by hitting 3 or 4 things. We don't allow that. And number two, which is probably the more important point that I'm searching for right now, is that we're working very hard on economic development. There has been strides made, they continue to be made. They're not ones that I can't tell you the specifics of them because that's the best way to keep them safe. I don't know the specifics of them, but I have confidence that what I'm being told is the truth. And Winslow has done an amazing job, and I congratulate them. And I think we're on the place where we can start doing that. And it was my understanding that the misunderstanding with the code enforcement officer was just that, and that it had been taken care of. If we need the city manager to address that, we can ask him to.
I think that'll be after the meeting,
Yeah, I was
personally,
gonna say-
if you wanna meet with him one-on-one.
We'll, there should be a follow-up, I feel like. We'll do it the proper way.
Okay.
And, we'll get it. Where everything's not just thrown at somebody, so.
Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we will go to item number 10, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, and do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passed. We'll close this meeting at 6:37 PM, and we will go straight into our work session.